Hey, it's Bryan.
Hey, it's Barry.
And welcome to another episode of the Collecti-Bros podcast. On this episode, is it worth it? Metal Gear for the NES. I actually chose this game because obviously we're getting Delta later this year. It's arguably the starting point for the series, but as far as console is concerned, this is where it all began. Also, I think this is interesting from a collectibles perspective because this is the only way we had to play this game for the longest amount of time. Before we get into it, though, let me invite y'all to like and subscribe on YouTube, please. That helps us out. I'll keep this short and sweet, don't you worry.
Too long!
Yep, follow us on all social media, join our Discord, all that good stuff. For y'all listeners, you already know. That being said, I also wanted to pick this game because I've never actually sat here and beat it before. It's one of those I've only thrown in my NES and just kind of like messed around with. I never actually got to beat the game, so this gave me another excuse to have another go at it before Delta comes out. Also, if you don't know, this is a direct port from the MSX2 version of Metal Gear. I've never ever played that one at all, so maybe we'll get to that one this year as well. But what is Metal Gear? If you don't know, Metal Gear is an action-adventure stealth game, and it's honestly a pioneer in the genre of stealth games. This was kind of what people regard as the first stealth game. It was built with the premise of, instead of guns blazing like every other action game in the 80s, you had to sneak around, you had to be stealthy, make your movements count, right? You're not just going to go in guns blazing. So this is a super interesting game. It was developed by Konami, and the NES version was published by Ultra Games. If you guys don't know that whole story, it's pretty interesting as well. Basically, Nintendo had publishers only allowed to publish 5 games a year. The reason being, if you guys know anything about the history of the market, Atari was kind of like, yeah, everybody make games, whatever, do what you want. And it kind of imploded the video game market. It destroyed it. There's just so much crap and garbage out there from third-party developers. Nintendo kind of had the foresight to be like, hey, we don't want this to happen. Now, that being said, the loophole was a lot of these companies would make shell companies basically in America, knowing that they could release 5 more games that year. So Ultra Games was basically the subsidiary of Konami America. Pretty interesting stuff there. This is their first game, so it kind of came out with a bang, and everyone's like, who's Ultra Games? This is crazy. You know, they didn't have the internet back then. We didn't know it was Konami back then. Obviously, now we know, but pretty interesting. Konami obviously wanted to get this game to the States. It was pretty popular in Japan. Kind of stuck on a failing PC, the MX2. This is the easiest way to get it over. The NES was obviously the king of North America. So this was like, hey, let's port this over to the most popular system. This was released in the for the Famicom in Japan in December 22nd, 1987. North America got it in 1988, and then the PAL territories got it in 1989. I think it goes without saying, everybody knows Hideo Kojima is the director-designer of Metal Gear, the original MSX version. However, this NES version, it's a pure port created by a completely separate team. He had no involvement in this game whatsoever. Actually, he's quoted to not be very kind to this game, but I do think this is important to kind of give the full quote, because I think this quote gets taken out of context a lot. Konami said in an interview with Nintendo Power, I had absolutely no participation in the development of the NES version. The NES version was a pitiful title developed cheaply and simply by a small team in Tokyo. That was during the bubble economy where anything and everything that was released would sell. I came across the game in a bargain bin and tried to play it, but the game design's pretty bad. There is some gameplay that includes infiltrating a base that didn't exist in the original. However, even I, the developer of the original game, was unable to infiltrate the base even one time. Furthermore, being Metal Gear, it goes without saying that Metal Gear should make an appearance in the end. However, from what I've heard, due to the technical difficulties in displaying the sprite on the screen, they swapped Metal Gear out for a gigantic monitor. That made me see that whoever created this game had no sliver of appreciation for the players. He goes on to say, even though it was an abomination, it was during the bubble economy and it sold millions. This title has soiled my reputation. That's where everyone usually stops to quote. The next part's important. They later asked him about the console ports for Snake's Revenge on the NES. He says, I was not involved with Snake's Revenge for the NES either. However, it was created by a Kobe development team and wasn't what I would consider a, quote, bad game. Actually, one of my juniors was working on the NES Snake's Revenge, and he said to me, we're making a sequel to Metal Gear, but I really want the true vision made by you, sir. It's because of that request that ended up creating Metal Gear 2 on the MSX. And this is why I think the most important part is. Snake's Revenge for the NES had never existed. There would never have been a Metal Gear 2, and there would never have been a Metal Gear Solid 1 for the PlayStation 1, which everybody knows Metal Gear Solid is this landmark IP, like one of the top 3 games for the PS1, legendary status, and he's out of the man's mouth. We would never have it if it wasn't for the console port for NES. So this is an important game in gaming history, in my opinion. It gets shit on a lot, but it seems very important.
I also like how the fact that it's heralded as like the first stealth game, but it wasn't even intended as a stealth game. It only had to be a stealth game because the MSX couldn't handle it.
Right.
And they were like, well, this can't handle the amount of bullets we want to spray, so let's focus on avoiding the enemy instead of shooting them down. So it didn't even like begin as a stealth game.
Right.
It was just a consequence of the hardware at the time.
It's funny for people to shit on, the limitations in NES, but literally the same birth.
Same reason.
Gave great,
yeah,
to the MS version.
Look, man, like it wasn't like, oh, I have an NES and it's not like the MSX was like the PS5 of the time. It's like, oh, let's take a PS5 game and crunch it down into an NES game. Like, it's not that different. I don't want to. The gap between the two is like hardware isn't that big. So I don't really know.
I mean, the fact that they are able to port it. Why everyone's saying the
NES one is just so fucking technologically inferior. It's like, how is that bad? It's not like we're shooting a man to the moon here,
Right. For sure, there's differences. Like, I'm not going to disagree with that. But the more I played this game, the more I realized this game kind of gets the shaft, especially when you know what it went through. So another interesting quote from Michiru Yuno, I'm sure I pronounced that right. He was the main sub-programmer on the NES version. He said, I worked on Metal Gear for NES when I was with Konami in Tokyo, which is still an important IP for Konami. Obviously, this is an old quote. My team was asked to port the original MSX2 version to the NES in 3 months' time. And we had to make some changes per manager's request due to the hardware limitations. What I did was simply port the game, so I can't claim credit for the gameplay. I was a fresh graduate when I worked on Metal Gear. I actually worked on an educational game for the Famicom Disk System before this, but it was canceled. So Metal Gear was my second project and my first shipped game. As for why the start of the game was changed to parachuting in jungle, the management team wanted to differentiate the Famicom version a bit since the MX2 version had already shipped. Having a different intro was the easiest and most efficient way for us since we only had 3 months' time. The final boss battle was changed to a robot from a computer simply due to the hardware limitations. It's probably possible to implement the robot if we used a better chip, such as the VRC4, but it wasn't available for us back then. And that's from Hardcore Gaming 101. He did an interview with them. But I mean, they had 3 months to make this thing. So like a simple port's the best way to do it. I think that kind of, go with that mindset, it kind of changed some things for me a little bit. I think it was an interesting caveat. But with that being said, let's dive into the story. So some more groundwork to cover. You guys got to remember this is an NES game. I know this series is known for crazy storylines that span and twist and turn. There's fingerprints of that in this game, but this is an NES game, keep in mind. This is back at a time when stories, you read the manual and that's pretty much what you got, or maybe you read the back of the box and that's what you got. This game does do something a little interesting. Kind of gives you story tidbits as you play the game. There's like an in-game story, which kind of unheard of for back then. I'm having trouble thinking of one other NES game. Obviously, there's RPGs and stuff, sure. But for the most part, like an 80s action game, there's not going to be storytelling in-game. This is kind of a pioneer in that. So another interesting thing about this is a Japanese team that localized it for the S. It was the actual devs that did it. So Konami was like super notorious for, they'd get a game from Japan, they would just kind of make their own story and change character names, like no sort of integrity for the original vision, right? This game's actually pretty goddamn faithful, which is pretty awesome. I think having those devs in Tokyo doing the story and everything really helped for that. That's pretty cool for them back then because not a lot of studios did that. They just didn't care. They just wanted to ship a game and make money, so that's pretty sweet. The only thing where this differentiated was kind of the marketing was a lot different for this game. In the Japanese version, it was very much like, hey, this is a stealth game like we talked about previously. However, this is very much like, if you look at the magazine ads from the time, it's like a James Bond game where it's like kind of highlighting the gadgets. Like you get to use all of these like you do, the player. So they wanted to like project Solid Snake as the player instead of like, hey, you're taking control of Solid Snake, who's an agent, blah, blah, blah. The main story of the game, though, outside of marketing did not suffer, which I think is really important.
So you're gonna tell us what the story of the game is?
Yes, I'm gonna read the back of the box
I'm
verbatim
sitting here
for
waiting.
you. Yeah. So the back of the box says, "Crazed Colonel Vermin Cactaffy."
You're gonna read it?
Oh yeah.
Bro, you've read so much already.
Crazed
Right.
Colonel Vermin Cactaffy poses a new terrorist threat to the world. Outer Haven leader Cactaffy has activated the ultimate super weapon, Metal Gear. Responding to the crisis, covert unit Foxhound, not Foxhounder, is called into action, and that's where you come into play. Trained in hand-to-hand combat and skilled in every weapon known to man, your Foxhound's lethal fighting machine, codenamed Solid Snake. But on this mission, you better be sly as well, to surprise heavily armored enemies, busting them up quickly and rescuing the hostages before alarms are triggered. You gotta maintain radio contact with Commander South, who will feed you crucial information on Metal Gear's whereabouts. To survive, capture submachine guns, Berettas, grenade launchers, plastic explosives until you can find and destroy Metal Gear, ending Cactaffy's reign of terror. So again, you can see the back of the box is in line with all the marketing for this game. But really, there's a lot more meat on the bone, I think, than the marketing gives this game credit for. Just a quick abridged version. They basically send you in as a rookie because the main commander, the main squad mate, Gray Fox, has been captured, right? So your first orders, find Gray Fox because he knows where Metal Gear is. Once you do rescue Gray Fox, he tells you, hey, Dr. Petrovich, he's the guy that only knows how to destroy Metal Gear. So you have to go find him. After you find him, he tells you how to destroy Metal Gear. You have to destroy the supercomputer that's connected to Metal Gear. And on your way to doing that, you figure out that the big boss, the guy that you report to, he's really the leader of this terrorist unit, and he's taken the Metal Gear into possession. So you have to kill Big Boss, credits roll. That's the story. I don't think they mentioned, obviously not going to give away the twist or whatever, but as you can see, the fingerprints for like the ongoing Metal Gear Solid games with a big twist and kind of turns, it's all in there. And I think that kind of gets overlooked and people shit on this game. It's interesting that like the DNA for Metal Gear Solid going forward is all over this game. The biggest changes as far as the story from the MSX version and the NES version is the beginning and end, right? The developer said they had to change the intro because Konami told them to. The original game, it's kind of like Metal Gear Solid. You scuba dive in. That's your first intro to the base. This one, you parachute in. And I don't think it really has an impact on the story, right? The interesting thing is there is 3 other commandos you parachute in with. You never see them. I think, honestly, it's probably just cool artwork they did. Or maybe it's the POWs you rescue that never implicitly say. But it doesn't change anything for the story. And then the end of the game, the only difference is instead of climbing a ladder, kind of like in Metal Gear Solid 3, you just take an elevator up, you run from the base. You don't get to see the mushroom crowd. Big Boss doesn't like yell at you through the radio like, I'll see you again. There's none of that. The game kind of just explodes and it ends. But look, man, this is way before Metal Gear Solid. This is in the NES era. This is the most you get for storytelling. And honestly, for an NES game, it's a pretty decent story. I'm not going to sit here and say it's amazing or anything, but they definitely put some extra effort into the story for this game. It is interesting if you go back, if you know anything about Metal Gear Solid 5, they kind of retcon some of this stuff. Basically, Venomous Snake is this Solid Snake, but none of that matters. We're sticking to the actual NES version before all that stuff went crazy. It is interesting to look back and play this through, rose-tinted glasses after playing Metal Gear Solid 5, though. I don't have a lot more to add to the story. I do think it's interesting that they tried to do a little bit more and try an innovative way of telling the story, so it gets extra points in that regard for me.
Well, here's the thing. I've never played. I played Metal Gear Solid 1. I don't care about, Metal Gear is not my series. I don't have a nostalgia attachment to Metal Gear, so this game to me is Vietnam, go shoot a weapon. Go blow up the enemy's weapon. That's what this game is. Maybe I'll sound like a crotchety old bitch, but, this isn't anything. It's just a war game. There's nothing special about this game as far as the story goes. The story is you're a special ops dude that drops in from a parachute in the sky to go kill an enemy weapon. That's it.
I don't think the story has a lot of...
I don't...
But the way they present it it's interesting for
presentation's a different topic. Yeah. I'm talking about the story. This cannot be heralded as, one of the great stories ever told. I've seen this in every other movie ever. Yeah.
If you just take it for what it is pretty generic.
That's just...
It's just the era, though, also. I'm not going to knock it. That's... For an NES game, it's fairly ambitious, I would say. But definitely the way they tell it is what stands out for me.
It's a game that spawned something further on, but it didn't really set, the groundwork for anything revolutionary.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, having the transmission thing, like, I don't know, the transmissions to me were less like storytelling and more of like a hint master.
Oh yeah.
So I guess it kind of depends on like what point of the story you were at, and it was used as like a plot device sometimes. But so at the end of the day, like, it is just kind of a mechanic to help you along.
Right.
It's a little more gameplay in that aspect, but I don't. Like I said, maybe I'll sound like a crotchety fucker, but
No, I don't think you're wrong. For what it is, the actual story is not. It's an NES game, bro.
I don't have like a bloated like mental appreciation for Metal Gear. So like to me, this is just your run-of-the-mill war game that every other game does.
Yeah, well, I love Metal Gear, but like this, it is an NES game, bro. Like, let's be serious. And without the retcons, you're not missing a lot here. Yeah, they introduced some characters, sure.
The series didn't start with Metal Gear, I'm sorry. It was Metal Gear Solid. Like, Metal Gear Solid is what did it. Metal Gear Solid is just a retelling, honestly, of Metal Gear, but in a better way.
Yeah.
In a better way, in a much more unique way, and it was like, okay, let's take this generic war story and like make it better.
I think the Metal Gear 2 Snake's Revenge is the first one where they really tried to start planting some seeds, but I don't think that's an invalid argument. I think it's a fair argument, for sure.
I don't know. Like, anytime I hear anybody talk about Metal Gear, the series, nobody's talking about shit on an NES.
Right.
It always starts with Metal Gear Solid.
Oh, yeah. No, that's...
Like, if you were going to have any game in the series signed by Kojima, which one would it be?
Metal Gear Solid.
It wouldn't be Metal Gear, right? Me, yeah. Like, that's the one that, like, changed the playing field of, like, technology on the PS1.
Right.
It was, like, a huge... like an actual stealth game, not just a stealth game because our computer couldn't handle bullets on a screen.
Right.
It did some crazy shit with a story. Like, that is the game of the series.
The storytelling of that game, the way they presented the story, like cinematic angles, cutscenes, yeah, that one definitely, is the one that stands out. I think they did what they could with the NES, even with the MSX, but again, we're talking cartridge-based 80s games here.
Right. Yeah. Let me roll back a second and I'm not trying to make it sound like I hate this game and it's a utter piece of worthlessness. I'm just trying to put it in perspective. This game should not get as much. Here's the thing. You know what? I'm just going to shut my mouth because Kojima fans are Kojima fans and I can't argue with them. So you know what? Y'all can have your Metal Gear. There's things to appreciate about it for sure. And I don't think the story is in that.
That's fair.
I think everything else in this game I've got really, it does really interesting things. And things that stand out, but the story is just a subpar NES story.
That's fair. I can't disagree with that if you go for what it is. The twist is cool. There's not a lot of games I can think of where there's a twist, but again, it's how the story's presented more so than the story itself. Yeah. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with that.
So let me just get out my big negative block right now, because the other option, like things we're going to talk about, I've got many more positive things to say.
I've got some negatives we can say for gameplay.
I mean, like, of course, like, there's obviously negatives for gameplay, don't get me wrong, but if there's going to be one block in this entire episode where I'm like, this is the weakest, it's the story,
That's
hands
fair.
down.
I think it's fair. Absolutely. You want to dive into gameplay so I can get my negatives out?
Sure.
The gameplay for this game. We talked about it. This is an action-adventure / stealth game. But I'm going to say some controversial shit here. This game reminds me of the original Legend of Zelda more than any other game I've ever played on the NES. The reason why.
You know what? Yeah.
You see it?
Yeah. Like, there was something, and before you continue, there's just something about this game where I admittedly tried my best to play this shit.
Just for the record, you're not like a 8-bit player at all. Yeah.
I tried. I infiltrated the building.
You got further than Kojima.
I infiltrated the fucking building. Here's the thing, though, is like, and I don't want to cut you off. I'm sorry, but like the thing about this is I try to not put too much weight on quality of life for the NES era, because like the games were intended to, here's the game and this is the game you're going to be playing for a while. It's not like now where everything's so saturated that I've got 10,000 million games to pick from and I can just jump over and over between things. Like, the NES library wasn't huge. There wasn't a huge competitor at the time to even, like, if you had an NES, that's what you had, because nobody was going to afford multiple consoles and multiple computers. So when you got one game, like, y'all played it to death, and that's how you got good at it.
Yeah.
And so this game is structured that you're going to have to play it to death to understand, like, what you need to do and where you need to go. There's no internet for you to go find what you got to do. There's maybe a hotline tip line. Maybe. I don't know. Was there one in the NES era? Like, call this number?
I think there was. I don't think this. I don't think it was all Nintendo
Super
games
Nintendo
pretty
for
much,
sure
right?
had one.
Yeah, I think it was Nintendo games.
I don't know if Nintendo did, but I know Super Nintendo did. Right. So, and in the same aspect of some other games people talk about all the time, like, when you're a kid and you're at school, you're swapping the stories and, like, being like, oh, I found this at this place, or I found this, or this is how you do it. And then you go home and then you try the new thing. But, like, this is a rinse and repeat game over and over and over. So, you go through these areas and they're the same areas every single time you go in. Like, if you go into an area and beat all the dudes and then leave the area and then go back into it, they all just respawn instantly. Right. So everything is exactly the same every single time you encounter it. And it takes the repetition to find the binoculars in the truck, or even find the fact that you can get in the truck. Yeah. So for me, I only knew how to get to the building because I looked up how to get to the building. Like, I'm not wasting my fucking time with these kinds of games. Right. I would go insane. So I was like, okay, to get into the building, I'm going to have to get inside this truck. Admittedly, in the walkthrough, didn't tell me which truck. So I had to try all three of them multiple times and run around screaming because I got things shooting at me, and your health just sucks. Yeah. Finally get into the truck, right, and I finally make it in, and at that point I was like, okay, let me see how far I can get without knowing where I need to go. Because I know, like, the game came with a fold-out map.
A requirement damn near for this game,
right,
dude.
and that's 100% a requirement for sure, but, like, it comes with a fold-out map, so it shows you every single area. It doesn't show you the enemies on there, but it gives you a layout of the entire map in the game.
And the cool thing is, like, we'll get into it a little bit, with the key cards, it actually tells you which card you need for each door. Right. So, like, super helpful.
Like, that's the hints you're gonna get. Yeah. And so, like, with the fold-out map, like, you're not getting the enemies, you're not getting the traps, you're not, like, it's not telling you how to play the game, it's just telling you, this is what the overall layout looks like, because there's so much fucking backtrack in this game. Oh, yeah. And that's kind of where I'm rolling this back around to talk about Zelda, because it's in the same aspect of Zelda where there's so much damn backtracking. Because you'll go into an area, you can't do anything. You're like, how do I get through this area? There's a door I can't get through. There's this enemy that's just blasting me with this crazy fucking tripod machine gun. And, like, nothing I'm doing is working. And it's because you've had to backtrack somewhere to find some key card, to find some item that helps you progress to that point. And that's what every
Zelda
adventure game does.
Yeah, and that's what Zelda is. And, everyone loves that game on the NES, and this game gets shit on like crazy. But, like, this is the closest thing I've played to Zelda. I've got really bad news for you on the NES.
Here's the thing, though. To call this game a stealth game, I don't think it's a stealth game,
Action
dude.
Adventure. Yeah.
It's like, it utilizes stealth in very small ways, and it's really only in the beginning for me, personally. Like, when the guys fall asleep and you can sneak around them or whatever.
Oh, once you get the silencer, you can just smoke everybody.
You can smoke everybody with the silencer, sure, but, like, the dogs are always going to fucking come after you. Yep. There's no way to sneak around dogs. There's some enemies where it's impossible to sneak around.
Yeah, where they see you instantly.
They see you instantly, and you have to, like, use your fucking rocket launcher or whatever, missiles, to kill the one super soldier dude that pins you in the corner.
Yeah, Arnold.
So saying this game's truly a stealth game, it doesn't really utilize stealth as much as it wants to think it does.
It's definitely the first stealth game, first attempt.
It is a go to this area, collect this item. Oh shit, I'm in the area and I don't have the item. Let me go back around and run around and try and figure out where it was. And I will appreciate that if you die and continue, you do have to start all the fucking way at the beginning, but you still have those items.
Yeah, the checkpoints are kind of different for this one. The MXX was where you died, and this one's based on your rank, because there's a ranking system in this. The more POWs you save, the more submissions you do. It basically gives you a 1, 2, 3, 4-star rank, and whatever rank you are, that's where it has a designated save point. That's where it loads you in. But the first, I don't know, half of the game, when you're a 1-star rank, it's the very beginning of the game,
you're in the fucking jungle, bro. Like,
and honestly, I think that's where a lot of the negative discussion you hear about this game online is it's kids in the 80s that rented it without the map.
Yeah.
And they kept dying and going back to the start, going back to the start.
Absolutely.
I could see how this would be a torturous experience if you didn't have some sort of walkthrough or a guide or some sort of point of reference. Maybe make your own map. Like, this had to have been like, whoo, it's not an easy game. Like, it's a tough game.
And it's interesting that, like, this isn't an easy game if you have no idea what you're doing. Like, I just stopped at one point. I said, you know what? I'm going to watch someone do an hour and 40-minute playthrough because apparently that's all you need to play this fucking game.
Crazy.
But, like, watching someone play this game in straight through in an hour and 40 minutes is like they know everything down to the pixel.
Right.
They have done this so many times that they know exactly how far up they need to go to plant that grenade for the tank. Like, they know exactly how many, whatever iterations of anything, like, they know everything. Yeah. There's not, like, constant deaths for these kinds of people. They've done it so fucking much.
Which is wild. It took me about 4.5 hours for clarity to beat this game, and I got lost. I died a lot.
There's, like, this isn't...
And I had a map and I had a walkthrough.
That's not the replay value of this game. Yeah. Like, you can't say Metal Gear has a replay value.
Oh, it's trial and error to the fullest extent.
Metal Gear is a replay value game does not go hand in hand. All right, like if we want to say Metal Gear has replay value, it's worth the price. It's got a lot of replay value. You're replaying it because you fucking have to. Yeah. You have to. Like, there's no chance that you're gonna do anything without
or even
over and over. It's like the NES Dark Souls, bro.
Even the layout of the game, like the game is really big, right? But it wants you to do things in a very specific order, so there isn't that hook of the replay. Maybe I can do it this time differently, or maybe I can go this way. Like, it wants you to do what it wants you to do.
Yep.
It'll tell you that explicitly when you call certain teammates or find certain items. I think, like,
here's the thing, like, you get to the room with the gas, it doesn't matter if you got the gas mask first or you still didn't get it. Like, whatever you do before that, your ass is still going back and getting the gas mask because you can't progress past that point.
Exactly.
And so it's kind of soft lock where it's like, okay, sure, I'm going to run around this facility and try and do it the most stealthy and efficient way, but it's still very linear.
Yeah.
Like, it's not... In the same way Zelda is too, it's very linear based on what items you have at what time and what you need to progress to the next stage.
For sure.
So.
Yeah, I think it's kind of crazy when you say it out loud, but if you've actually played the game and gone through it and beaten it, it is the most similar experience I've had to Legend of Zelda on NES, like, hands down. It's interesting side note, though. We're definitely going to catch heat for that, but it's okay. Also, I already talked about that, I'm sorry. I will say, one of the critiques of this game that we were talking about, it is a difficult game. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like, I got whipped. But I will say, I feel like the more gadgets you get, the more items you get, you learn some of the mechanics and some of the quirks of this game, like, you know, how to turn fast and which pixel when you go around the room to shoot a guy. It does get a little easier once you learn more. I feel like it does a good job of, like, ramping up that difficulty. Like, it's hard initially. It's very hard. But then it gives you the tools to be able to succeed. And when you do pass certain enemies and stuff, it is a pretty rewarding experience. There's also a bunch of little tricks and trades you can do. For example, if you find your first box of ammo, you get 20 rounds, right? You can literally pull up the transponder and call, hang up, and the ammo reappears. So you can just max your ammo out.
Oh, like exploits? That's
right,
amazing.
Yeah. So you can do that for rations. So you got unlimited health. If you know where the room's at, you can run back and go get more health. Use the transponder, the health reappears. And the pitfalls are fucking bullshit. Like, let's just get that out of the way. They're not on the map. They're hardly in any guides. Like, you're just walking and the room disappears, and it's like, if you don't use that transponder fast enough and call...
There's no escaping it either.
Yeah, the only trick is if you can call the transponder while it's the smallest hole, because it's basically a hole that expands, it'll stay the size of that hole. It'll disappear off the map, but the hole will still be there. But let's say you get it the first pixel, it'll just be that one pixel, and you can walk past. So, like, there's little things you can do to make this game easier. Obviously, it is that it's people that did rent this as a kid and fail over and over and find these things. But I overall enjoyed my time with it. It's a unique NES game in the sense that it's not like a side scroller. You're not just scrolling left to right the whole time. It's static rooms, basically. And there's interesting aspects. The gadgets are fun. Like the binoculars, you can like look ahead and see where the enemies are. The problem is, here's one of my negatives. Let's say I killed an enemy in a room, right? And I'm like, oh, I want to peep the next room. Maybe we get the binoculars out. I look over to the next room on the right. There's 2 enemies. Cool. As soon as you close the screen and get back in the game, the enemy's going to reappear. So, like, what's the point of even killing them in the first place? There is a bunch of things like that where it's like, I don't know if it was a design choice or if it was just a limitations thing, but that's the kind of, like, cheap frustrations that these NES games kind of have. But I do feel like it gives you the tools you need to succeed. Now, whether you're going to get to that spot to get those tools is a kind of a different conversation.
I'm wondering if that is just coding where they've got it some way where once the system recognizes that you're in another square, it'll refresh the second it goes back.
Yeah, it makes me think the binoculars like another screen. Maybe.
Right, so maybe like the utilization of the binoculars as an item, like the actual computer thinks it's switching over to another area and then switches back, which makes sense, and maybe they didn't have a way to like fix it, and they're like, well, shit, I don't know. But, I mean, like, overall, the gameplay's not bad. I don't want to sit here and make it seem like it is, because there's some really interesting things that it does. I just don't want to make this game seem like something it's not. It's an action-adventure game.
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
I think it's fair to say, and it does some things really interesting, and it does some things really bullshit.
Some of the best things about the gameplay in this is, like, and I know that there's differences to the MSX version, and I'm not talking about that one because I didn't...
Right.
We didn't play it. We're not talking about that one. The only comparison that like is notable for me to even point out is when you go into an area and you do get caught, all of the enemies try and run after you and shoot you. And so you can run around, run away, trying to beat them up. In the NES version, all you got to do is just run to the next room.
Right.
And the alert goes away. It's like they've never seen you. And the MSX version, the alert continues until you can hide, or I don't know like how you can reset it, but the NES one just resets on every room.
Yeah.
Same deal, probably hardware limitations, but like, I shit you not, like that's the only way I was able to do anything half the time.
I cheese the shit out of it. Are you kidding me?
Like if someone's running after me, I say, oh shit, I just turn around.
Right.
I go back to the other screen, pray that the guys that spawn there like aren't spawning in a direction that sees me immediately, but I'm immediately turning back around again. So it's just like screen hopping.
Yeah. To the fullest.
Or it's really nice, like, if you pop over to an area that has no enemies, it's, like, cool, I can sit here for a second and maybe, like, consult my map.
Right.
And I don't have to worry, like, about me popping over and, like, me hitting the start button. And as soon as I go back into it, he turns and sees me or something. So that's nice. And then also the utilization of the transponder, is it transponder?
Transponder, yeah.
Having it be, like, a hint system... Because there's so many times in games where you go get new items and it tells you fucking nothing about what it is.
Right.
About what it does. About when you're supposed to use it. So anytime you get a new item, you can call the transponder. You can call Big Boss and be like... Big Boss is like, oh, a grenade launcher. You're going to have to learn how to use that. Or like some shit. Or you get C4 and it'll be like, plastics explosives. You can use that anywhere. Or like, if you get... an enemy, what was her name, Diane?
Oh yeah,
Diane pops up at one point and she's like, oh, that enemy is weak to missiles or something. Right. So it's kind of like a little cheat system in there where if you get stuck or you get something and you're like, okay, what the fuck do I do next? Like there is something to reference.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. It's not foolproof. Like once you make that call, it goes away and you can't go back and be like, oh, what did you say about the grenade launcher?
Right.
Shit's gone.
If you push a button after they say it, you're fucked.
Yeah.
And it is funny. There's cool things with the transponder, like you talked, Diane. Like if you get to a certain rank, she becomes more helpful, which is a cool little implementation. And then there's a boss later that has like her brother hostage, and if he dies in that battle, she won't help you anymore. Mm-hmm. There's cool things in this game like that. And then there's shit with the transponder where Big Boss, for some reason, being this terrorist cell leader who's the leader, is the most incompetent fucking useless, forgetful idiot I've ever seen in my life. How many times are you playing where it was like, oh, I forgot about this. I forgot this. I forgot to tell you this. Like, it's crazy, bro. But it is nice where it's like, they tell you what the item does, like you were saying. That's super helpful, especially if you did rent this as a kid and didn't have a map. But transponder's cool. It's a mainstay in the Metal Gear series. To see the DNA of that being spawned here was pretty cool from a fan's perspective. And I'm glad you enjoyed it from not being a Metal Gear fan. Like, it was nice.
Like, if we're going to talk about anything in this game that felt unique, it was the transponder. Yeah. Hands down.
The fact you could receive and call to on NES was pretty unique. And that they would change the frequency. Like, if you were on the line too long, they'd be like, hey, we have to change this frequency before the enemy picks it up. Like, you better write that shit down. Yeah. Because you're not going to remember unless you get a call back and like, oh, thank God. But the further you play in the game, there's more and more people. Like, there's a weapons expert later that will tell you which enemies are damaging, like you were saying earlier. There's a boss person. There's one that will tell you where the gear is. There's one that I think it is Diane. She infiltrates and she'll leave you items. So she'll be like, hey, if you call randomly, and she'll be like, I left health in the second floor of this room. You could go up there and there'd be health because she put it in there. It's pretty cool for an NES game. The last thing I want to cover, it's something big in the Metal Gear series, is the boss fights. Again, I don't want to sit here and compare and contrast, but I think this is probably, as far as the gameplay goes, one of my big negatives. That the boss fights were pretty generic, minus the one with the hostages, right?
I mean, they're as generic as an NES is going to get. It's a bigger sprite with more health.
Yeah, like
and some items might not work on them. Yeah. That's it.
Like there's a hind fight in the MSX version. That would have been really cool in this. Like a hind helicopter, which is staple in Metal Gear. That's gone. These bosses are literally just guys with different guns. Like there's a shotgunner who has a shotgun. Surprise. Machine gun kid has a machine gun. No way. Flamethrower man. I don't know what the fuck his name is, but he's a flamethrower.
And it's the same deal where it's like they have no variation in them. So once you encounter that boss fight, they all act exactly the same every single iteration.
Right.
So like you get to the tank, and the tank has the two fucking machine guns on the side that sprays one side and sprays the other, and you just gotta hide behind the wall until the left side sprays, and you can run up and plant a fucking mine and then run back behind the wall.
It's just learning the patterns. Just like
it's a very, very pattern-heavy game.
Which I knew there was bosses in this, because like I said, I messed around with it previously, but going through it, it was a little disappointing. But again, I'm not going to sit here and be like, fuck this game because of that. It's an NES game, bro. Like, chill. One other cool thing I want to point out that is absolutely fucking hilarious I have to bring up. The password system. So, NES games, they didn't have batteries, some of them. This one had a password system. It's crazy long. Like, I think it's 5 characters, and there's 6 sections of 5 characters you have to input because it tracks your gear, your time, all that shit. But if you type in the code, fuck 'em 11111111111, it gets you to the last boss fight. You don't have any ammo or weapons or anything, though.
That's really funny.
Yeah, it was censored. It was censored in the PAL version, but it's pretty great. I have to try it out for a clip. Like, it's so funny, dude. Other than that, you want to dive into the graphics? As far as the graphics go in this game, I know you're not a huge NES person, but what's your initial thoughts and impressions of the graphics?
Oh, one of the best NES looking games. Yeah. Hands down. There was actual effort in some of the designs. It wasn't fucking black and then a couple squares somewhere. Like, what did I send you? I sent you a picture and was like, I expected it to look like this.
Yeah.
Do you remember what it was?
Oh, we talked too much. Let me try to find it.
Yeah, Oh, Ghostbusters.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I sent Bryan a picture of the fucking Ghostbusters game on the NES, and it was like, I thought this game would look like this. This is what I was ready for. This is what I was prepared for. And then I get it, and I was like, this is a nice looking game.
Yeah.
I can tell it's in the jungle. I can tell he's got camouflage on. The enemies, I can tell some of them are wearing tank tops, and they got sunglasses and little guns in their hands.
Right.
The trucks, I'm like,
detailed.
They're detailed trucks. Some of the items, like on the tables, you could tell what they were before you even walked up to them, instead of just being a blob. So, like, I thought this was gonna look like dog shit.
Even the sprites are, like, pretty animated for an NES. Like, if you switch weapons, like, Snake's gonna hold a different weapon. Or if the dog's asleep and he wakes up, you'll see his tail wag when he's chasing you.
Or when he's, like, curled up on the side.
He breathes?
Yeah, so, like, all the enemies don't look the same. Like, some of the enemies, like, for the normal guys look normal, but then, like, the beefy ones, you can tell that they're not just the same sprite, bigger.
Right.
Like, they've altered them.
Or the guys that wear armor. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the graphics look great.
Yeah.
They're A+.
It's funny, the first thing people mention is, like, oh, there's no Metal Gear in this game. But, like, the rest of the sprites they're big. They look really well. Even the monitor, the big PC you destroy, it's huge. It takes up half the fucking screen.
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say why or why not there was a Metal Gear and the struggles they had to go through with that, but...
3 months to port, remember that.
Right, like, I mean, in a different scenario, it may have been different. You got Metal Gear on the front of the box, I guess.
Yeah, that's in the name of the game. But, I mean, look here, man. There's one spot specifically where I was like, holy shit, this is an NES. And I don't know if you saw it or not. When you walk over these bridges and they're like, drawbridges basically, and they like swing with the wind, and every like wood panel like swings in a different direction. It's cool as shit looking on an NES. It's almost like a 3D effect, and it happens twice when you go down 2 sets of them. But I was like, holy shit, this looks really fucking cool on the NES. I'll be sure to put that in the video. But
I mean, the fucking pit in the floor opening up is exactly NES graphics,
right.
or a hole opening up in the floor.
Right.
Like, nothing crazy there. The bullets flying around, nothing crazy
squares,
there.
yeah.
But, like, having the guys parachute, like, immediately parachute out of the plane and the parachutes inflate.
Sick.
Like,
Yeah, the intro was sick.
They're pretty cool.
Which,
so
again, that's all original NES stuff. So, like, they did a great job with that. Even the ending with the explosion, like, the colors are kind of like, but they put effort into it. You can tell it wasn't just like, we have 3 months, just get something out there.
Yeah.
Even if I've seen comparisons of the sprites, yeah, it's a little less detailed, but it's still the Solid Snake sprite. It looks like him. You can tell exactly who it is. I think the characters are probably the highlight for me. The outdoor environments, again, all original NES stuff. They look great. You can tell what everything is. There's no question about anything. My only caveat is some of the indoor environments, it's not a lot you can do with it. You're in like warehouses and stuff, right?
Yeah, and that was going to be one of my points too. I think for this game overall is there's a lot of aspects of this game that's really cool the first time you see it, and then you just see it or you hear it over and over and over and over again.
Right.
And so as many times, as many iterations as you have to go through this game to like get through it. You know, like the first time I got through the jungle and got to the building, I was like, all right, cool, I'm out of the jungle, I got a whole new environment, and that's what the rest of the game looks like, dog.
Yeah.
It does not really look like anything else. You can look at the map that's supposed to come with the game.
Yeah.
You're in a building that looks like a warehouse.
You're in building 1 or you're in building
or you're
1
in a
through
jungle.
5.
Like, that's really it.
Yeah.
So there wasn't much variation. There was a couple levels that may have had, like, the floor, like, a little bit different.
Right.
It's
like 80s military industrial.
Yeah, yeah.
There's only so much you can do with that. I do think it's interesting. There's not a lot of games that I can think of off the top of my head that are like set indoor environments for the NES. So that's kind of interesting. They kind of had maybe the blueprint for that. There's not a lot I can think of. Everything's outdoors. You're in a jungle or like.
I will say, I'll give it some credit for as much as everything looked the same. It seems like they did try to make each area unique, at least for how things were set up. Like, even if it was a room full of trucks, like, at least the trucks would be positioned a little bit differently.
Right.
So.
And there were some trucks, I remember, that had, like, the ones you can go in had, like, the tarp over it. And there were some that didn't have it. So, like, there's variety in the sprites.
Right.
It is, the sprite works pretty solid in this game, in my opinion. No pun intended. It's pretty good. One jarring thing for me, and I'm sure it's hardware limitations, the transponder, I just wish, like, the faces were talking. That's like a staple in Metal Gear.
That's a nostalgia thing, though. Get that out of your brain.
That's true.
The fact that we can even get the detail of the transponder with text on one screen
and the dial
is
moves
impressive.
and shit. Yeah, that's true.
Like, just push that out. Push that the fuck out. Get it out of here.
If you haven't played another Metal Gear game, you're not going to notice. You know, it's just a little thing from a nerd like me that's slightly jarring, but I agree. It's not like it's fuck this game because
like
of that,
having a transponder screen.
Yeah, that was cool.
You know, like if you went to the menu and hit transponder and it just had the little text box on the bottom, like you were talking to them, that would have been so fucking easy.
Yeah.
But they took the time to do a whole transponder screen
that sends and receives.
with a dial, with an adjustable, what is it called? The signal thing? Channel? Frequency channels, like adjustable frequency channels, like that.
That was cool.
That was a lot.
Yeah.
So, get them faces out of here.
Yeah,
We're not there yet. Get the nostalgia, rose-tinted glasses out. See ya.
No, it was cool. Honestly, I think this game's a really pretty showcase for the NES. And it's not like it was a late release game either. You know, like they had 3 months to do this.
Was it 85 or 87?
87, I think it said. 86, 87. Yeah, 87 in Japan, 88 in the US. So yeah, I mean, like, this game looks great for what it is. Like, hats off to 3 months crunch time. Can you believe that? That's super impressive for 3 months. Let's talk sound and music. The soundtrack, again, they only had 3 months to develop this thing. This NES version has songs from the MXS version, but it also has new music composed by Kazuki Muraoka. So Metal Gear fans are going to recognize that name. He's kind of Kojima's guy, right? He did Zone of Enders. He did all of the Metal Gear Solid games. He did Contra. So, you know, the guy's got some good work in him. And I think the music's pretty awesome for this game. You've got 11 tracks. Overall, you've got ranging music, you've got suspense, sneaky type of stuff, you've got action-packed NES synthesizer 80s stuff. There's good variety. I will say, I wish they would have mixed it up a little bit with the areas. You have the one song that plays whether you're in the jungle, whether you're in the building the whole time, and it will not change unless you get alerted, or if you're in a boss fight. Like I said, there's 11 tracks that could have like jumbled up. Even the buildings could have had different music, you know, just to mix up that monotony of that theme. I do really dig the alert theme. I think the alert theme is awesome. Like, it holds up really well. It's upbeat. It's fun. It's appropriate for like, oh shit, I got caught. My thing is the only knock on this. I think all the music sounds good. Even the one you hear a lot, it sounds fine. It's just, damn, you kind of hear it a lot, huh?
Yeah, to me, music's got to be like the second weakest aspect of this game. And that's to say that I still like enjoyed the music. I thought the music that was created was really good.
Oh yeah.
It sounded really good, especially for being NES like chip.
Yeah, which I'm admittedly not a huge fan of. I don't have like on my Spotify playlist bumping it, you know?
No, there's a lot of like good variation in that main song you hear, but that's the problem is it's the fucking main song. Over and over and over. And with a game that requires fucking iteration out of your butthole, over and over and over. It's one of those games where like you gotta fucking mute it, dude. You have to, at some point in time, to save yourself, you have to mute it.
I was pretty done with the main theme about halfway through it. You know, 2 hours straight of the same shit. Like I said,
the first time, same deal with the jungle, and same deal getting in the building. You're like, oh man, this is kind of dope. You're like, this song's pretty good. And then the alert theme happens when you like get alerted, and it switches over, and you know, and then you die, and then you go back again. You're like, here's a fucking song again.
Yep.
Here we go. And dude, and the transponder.
Dude, that transponder is so fucking annoying.
God.
Oh my god. Not when it calls you, but like
the whole
the
thing.
siren when you're done, when you're like over out. Yeah, dude. Oh
that
my
was
god.
annoying. And then the shitty clackety clack of the fucking
the text.
It's just like MySpace blown out audio typewriter smacking. Like that's what it sounds like. It's just
dude, that transponder sounds burnt into my brain like
as
the
much
worst
as I
kind
thought
of way,
the
bro.
transponder was cool, that was not.
Yeah.
So like this is a game where to get the full effect of it, play it for about 20 or 30 minutes and then mute it the rest of the way and just play like Spotify or something or play a YouTube video or something. But like, oh my gosh, that's hands down one of the worst things about this game, but it's an easy fix because I can just mute it.
Yeah. Like I said, I appreciate the 11 tracks was a lot for an NES
yeah,
game.
It
but
is.
Like, you don't hear them enough is
No.
my biggest issue. Like, I think the actual music itself is good. Like, it's really good. It got Kojima's attention. He was like, hey, this guy's got talent. You're doing the rest of my games.
Yeah.
He did all of his games, bro.
But they're very situational.
Yeah. Wish every building just had their own music.
Honestly.
So, like, because you have to backtrack and shit, right? Like, that would
have to
also help
backtrack
with you
so
being
many
like, am I
times.
in the
You
right
could-
building?
Right, you could have a mental note of like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm in the building.
The annoying song or the good song. Yeah.
Oh shit, I'm back in the building with this song again. That's the door that I was supposed to go through. Here we go. But man,
Yeah.
it was rough.
Even the sound effects, pretty generic sound effects. I do appreciate some of the shit they did. Like the silencer makes the gun sound different. Like, cool, good job. NES, you didn't have to do that. But like, the rocket launcher sounds different than the machine gun. That type of deal, it's cool. But sounds are generic. It's beeps and boops. It's NES, man. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and knock it too hard. But probably my least favorite aspect of the game is the sound. Which, again, I don't think the music's bad. But goddamn, give us some variety, bro. Like, mix it up. That's my only knock. Mondo did do a physical release on vinyl for this game. If you guys want to check that out, you're not going to find it. It's limited to 1,000 pieces, but apparently
Mondo
people will knife where they
is.
press it to a vinyl. So interesting little aspect there. But other than that, let's get on to the main event here. The price and collectability aspect / is it worth it? Transponder sound. All right, so Metal Gear for the NES sold really well in North America. Sold over 1 million units. So there's a lot of these out there. Nintendo.
That's a player's choice.
Yeah. Nintendo Power had it ranked 104 on their best top 200 games of all time. Pretty interesting. The NES version of Metal Gear.
That's nostalgia speaking. Yeah. That's nostalgia 100%.
Yeah, for the NES though, not for every Nintendo console. Excuse, just for the NES.
All right, that's fair. Were there even 100 titles on the Nintendo?
There's a lot on Nintendo, yeah. But I mean,
I'm about to look up exactly how many there were.
Revolutionary title, so I don't know if it's necessarily one of the best. But I mean, if like 100 is okay for it, you know, it's.
Oh, I want to know exactly how many were on there.
So roughly top.
All right, I stand corrected here.
Roughly top third percentile. So this was the only way you could play this version of Metal Gear for the longest time. You had to have the cartridge. First time we ever got a re-release was the bonus disc, the Japanese version for the premium package of Twin Snakes on GameCube. This was included only with that edition.
So it was the Japanese version then?
Mm-hmm. No, it was Metal Gear for NES, but it was the Japanese version of Twin Snakes, where this is the first time you could play this game other than the cart.
In the U.S.?
No. In the U.S., the first time you could do it other than the cart was the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection, which was super recent. So
for PS3?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. They had that too. It
was on PS3, yeah.
That was the MSX version, though, not the NES version.
Oh.
So, yeah. Yeah, the first time you could actually play the NES version and the MSX version together was the Master Collection. So this is the first time...
That was hot doo-doo? Yeah, okay.
And it works now.
It works now.
I will say I think it's one of the things that this game never really was super expensive, but I think that's why people wanted it. It's literally the only way you could play it for the longest time. There's videos and shit of even people being like, I can finally get rid of this cartridge and like tossing it because they have the Master Collection. But I do think that times have changed, and I think you can kind of see this game going down and down and down because of that. There's a million of them also. There's a lot out there. So right now...
It's one of those games where it's like, it's going down in the sense of there's more accessible ways to play it,
right.
And there's still a space for it with Metal Gear collectors and NES collectors, but I don't want, like, for the die-hard Metal Gear fans, like, for normal Metal Gear people, they're not going this far back.
No.
They're not picking up Metal Gear for the NES, because it's dog balls to play.
Right.
They'll go as far back as Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's really it.
So,
Once again, Metal Gear Solid.
North American version, loose cart's about $12, $15, that range. Complete in box, it's hovering right around $99 to $100. I'm not even going to worry about sealed because it's fucking stupid. The Famicom release, it's going around $20 for the cart, 130-ish, 150-ish in the box. And the PAL version actually is the most expensive. Loose is about $50 for the cart. Complete in box is hovering around $200. It's interesting. The box art, I think we got the best box art, honestly. It's just straight rip off of Terminator. It's literally a still from Terminator of Kyle Reese leaned up against a wall, and they put Metal Gear at the bottom left. But I think the box art...
Isn't it the actor?
Yeah. Or no, the character's name in Terminator.
No, I mean, doesn't it look like the actor?
Michael Biehn, yeah, it does look like him. Konami was notorious for it. If you look at the Contra box, like Arnold's on the front and Kyle Reese again, they put like the headband on. I did see that. I guess somewhere Kojima said he had no part in the illustration decisions. Yeah, I believe it. Konami did that shit though. They swiped everybody.
How popular are war games in Europe?
It's a good question. I know with the censorship and stuff too, like he doesn't have a gun on the cover. If you know the Contra story,
it's cut off, right? Or
it's like
it's cropped.
It's like black barred, or I think it's gray, so it looks like that. The Metal Gear is still on there, who has nukes, but like no guns, and that's the same thing with Contra. They were cyborgs instead of humans, so I think there was a lot of like censorship laws back then. That's why they did that kind of stuff. They didn't want games where you're killing people, so that's why Contra made them all cyborgs. But I think we do have the prettiest box art, I will say. I think it looks better in the Japanese one. Plus, you get the big NES case instead of the small Famicom. So as far as like variants go, I think we have the best. But let's just talk complete in box. Around $100, you get a map, you get a game. Is it worth it, Barry?
It's $100. I feel like is a really cheap NES game.
Especially an iconic one. I know there's a million copies out there, but...
One of the start of the franchise deals, like, it doesn't play terribly. It's actually a really decent game, even though Kojima thinks it's dog shit. $100 $100, honestly, for a complete in-box NES, complete cardboard anything is cheap.
Yeah.
Like, 100%. It's not, Little Samson or anything. It's not rare by any means.
It's an important game, though.
I think it's... That's debatable. I think it's held... I think it's one of those games where people hold on to it, who really like the series. They never sees the inside of an NES. But I feel like this game is a little bit more of a collectible piece than like a collectible game.
Yeah.
At this point. So, I mean, like, $100... I wouldn't buy this for $100. But that's just
It's not your bread and butter, yeah. That's fair.
It's a game where if you want Metal Gear, $100 is a good price. I've spent more on other games that are less known.
Yeah.
So it's not a bad option, especially if you want like a decent NES collection, because like there's not a lot of good NES games. In my opinion, there's not a lot of good ones. And this one is good all around except for just a subpar story.
Yeah.
So
I think this is worth it. I think $100 for an iconic title. Yeah, there's a million of them. Don't give me that shit. There's more Contras, and look how much Contra goes for. Same publisher, same developer. Like,
how many Marios are there?
Right, and it goes for more. Like, and then hearing honestly the fact that they had 3 months, because this game's got a horrible rep online. Let's just cut the shit. Like, people shit all over this game. Angry Video Game Nerd did a video on it, and I think that kind of added fuel to the fire.
Well, here's the thing. People compare it to the other version and already have high expectations and high standards because it's Metal Gear.
Yeah.
Instead of looking at this game as its own thing and not comparing it to other things, you can talk about this game being a bad port from the other version that I think is valid. Yeah. But saying this game is bad individually, I think is wrong.
Yeah, I agree.
I think your opinion is bad. I think your opinion's wrong. It's not a bad game.
Yeah.
Especially looking at in the lens of like its own thing.
Yeah.
If we don't think about the MSX, let's not compare the two. Like, it exists on its own as a perfectly acceptable game.
I brought it up a couple times, but I really tried to avoid comparing it because I did want to like measure this on its own. I think that's important for this, honestly. It's like Kojima said,
this title of this episode is not MSX, NES, Metal Gear, which one's better.
It's not one of the yearly ports episodes we do.
No.
This is the NES version of Metal Gear, and I think too many people are too quick to immediately point at the MSX version. I think every video I saw doing research on this game, instantly, like, first, 3 paragraphs it was brought up. It's not a fair comparison, man. And this game does very unique things on the NES. If you want to see some really cool shit that no other NES game does, okay, you're going to get some interesting aspects in terms of gameplay. You're going to get the seeds planting for the rest of Kojima's games, even though he's not involved with this, but it is a port. Like, let's cut the shit.
I mean, you're also talking about, do you want a game for a widely accepted console? Do you want a game that fits on your shelf with your other ones? Do you want the lesser expensive version?
Yeah. Well, that's another cool thing, too. Like, the North American
the
version is super
MSX2 version
affordable.
is expensive.
Let's look. I think it's, like, insane.
It's expensive. All right, it's expensive. And who's really sitting there being like, I have to get the superior version of Metal Gear for the very first one.
And you gotta buy MXS, which
you have to buy MSX too. Yeah, like, that's not happening, man. Like, a Nintendo is accessible, and it's a perfectly good option.
It's about $700 on the MSX for the Japanese version.
Unless you want to be a fucking hoity-toity bitch boy that was like, I only collect the best of the best. It's still MSX2 Metal Gear. I'm sorry.
$700 versus $100.
Right, like, you can buy an NES and Metal Gear and have fun.
Yeah. That's the thing, man. I think, actually, I had preconceived notions of this game going in. I heard how bad it was. I kind of prepared myself for it. The more I played it, I had a pretty good time, man. I'm not going to say I was like, this game's fucking amazing, but, like, I was even like, this kind of surprised me with how solid of a title this is. Yes, it has issues. We talked about that.
What game doesn't?
Exactly. What? But for this game just to be the othermost like shit stain of the NES, which everyone regards it, it's not fair at all, man. This is
like, bro, it ain't no Ghostbusters.
Exactly. This is a competent game. It's got some historical significance out of your Lord and Savior, not yours, but Kojima fanboy's mouth. you wouldn't have Metal Gear Solid without this game. So I think it's an important game in that regard. I think $100 is okay. You see me 100 times on this show talk about paper box, $100, sure. Yeah. And like the fact that it's dropping too, there's a point you're going to, once the market corrects itself 100%, it's going to hover around $70, $80, you know? In the good old days, that's how much this was. I picked up my Famicom version, 2 or 3 years ago for $40. Like, come on, man. It's a no-brainer for me, honestly.
Well, yeah, I feel like 2 or 3 years ago, Westerners...
It's gone up since then.
Here's the thing. 2 or 3 years ago, Westerners were not interested in Famicom, Super Famicom. Mm-hmm. And then, guess what happened 2 or 3 years ago? It was 5 years ago now, right? Everything got fucking expensive. Yep. And then everyone was like, oh, wow, Japanese games are kind of cheap. Yeah. And they started flocking towards those. Yep. And that's why you see a lot of Famicom, Super Famicom prices increase, because like people started flocking to that because they were like, oh, import fees aren't that much. Oh, I can get the same game on a Famicom for like a fraction of the cost.
This game, honestly, though, I would want, as an English speaker, like you need it in your native language. Like there's text and shit you need to figure out. Like this would be tough playing the Japanese version. But I think it's totally worth it at $100, man. No question about it.
Well, here's the thing: I can slap that in a Retron with a translation pack. It's fine.
There's ways around it now.
Yeah, the Japanese versions of these cart games have always usually been, not all the time, but 9 times out of 10 for us, a lot less expensive. It's not often that an NES game is more expensive in Japan, especially a game that did well in Japan. Yeah. This isn't like 50-cent Bulletproof that no one gave it a single shit about in Japan. Like, this is very popular there too. Right. So it wasn't like they didn't make a lot of them.
I wish I could find sales data for the Japanese version, but I couldn't. But I know the MXS version sold well enough where Konami was like, let's port this to the most popular console. You know what I mean? And it's not like it's a disc version. It's an actual cartridge for Famicom. So, interesting stuff. I think this game kind of needs a different view, a different voice. I think it kind of deserves a little bit of respect for getting shit on for so long in the internet community. And even if you ask anybody, we were talking about at the show we went to, it's like, oh, next episode we're doing is Metal Gear. Everyone's like, oh, that fucking game I ran as a kid, blah, blah. I'm like, I hope this can change some perspective.
You were at that show, you know who you are.
No, I don't mean it like that. I'm just saying, like, I think there is a lot of like pre-built notions on this game with people that haven't played it in a long time, haven't ever played it, automatically want to compare it. Like, give it a try, man. That's the thing. Even the cart, like, hey, we were selling a copy for $5. Like, you can find cheap cartridges out there. I think it's worth a play. I think it's worth your time. As a collector, I think it's worth it. It's a great conversation piece. Like,
pretty looking box.
Yeah, dude.
Great art on the front.
Box art's badass, man. Like, I don't give a shit. And the screenshots on the back are cool. Yeah.
The title's stylish. I think the overall design of the box is a really cool piece.
It is. I think as a collectible or as a game, I think on both merits, it's 100% worth it. Well, that does it for this episode of Is It Worth It? What do you think? Let us know in the comments. Let us know what you think. Barry, what is next on the podcast?
Next time on Collecti-Bros podcast, one of the most popular things to ever grace the internet or anything, lists.
Yeah.
This is the thing that everyone always is curious about. Anywhere you see an article, top whatever, you click on it. All right, this is a clickbait episode. Yeah. Our top 5 video games.
Good choice with the amount of subs we've gained.
Of all time. Time for some clickbait, baby.
That'll be a fun one, though. Like, obviously, if they're top games, we love them, right? It's a good excuse to ramble on.
Here's what I want. I want all of y'all, which none of you guys are gonna do it, I already know, because nobody listens this far into the episode. You write down what you think our top 5 games are.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Because some people will probably guess it right on the money. If you know us.
Ones would be easy for us, but like 2s through 5s, we can get a little messy.
2s through 5s? Yeah. I'm transparent as hell, bro.
I know you're one.
So anyways, our top 5 games, we're gonna talk about them.
It'll be fun. Thanks for listening, guys. Appreciate it. The podcast has grown on YouTube and on audio listeners. We appreciate each and every one of you. Stay oppressed. Break that ceiling. Ching. Batman Begins. Later.
See ya.